The morning smelled of gunpowder and sea salt. Across the shimmering waters, 1,000 men stood in gray and blue, watching the first cannon fire bloom like thunderclouds over Fort Sumter. The war had begun. Eli Morgan didn't think it would come to this. Just 3 months earlier, he had been teaching Latin to restless farm boys in a one-room schoolhouse in Kentucky. Now he was standing shoulder to shoulder with men twice his size, holding a musket that shook in his hands. He had joined the Union Army because of a letter written by his father before he died of fever, folded neatly in the pages of the family Bible. "If this country ever tears itself apart," his father had written, "fight for the side that keeps it together." Those words burned in Eli's chest as the first cannonball screamed over the harbor. Smoke coiled upward like a serpent, and the world changed forever. The war begins. By dawn, Charleston's docks were chaos. Civilians crowded rooftops, shouting and waving flags, some cheering, some crying. Soldiers in gray, Confederates, fired their guns in unison, a thunderous chorus echoing across the bay. Eli's regiment, the 12th Kentucky Volunteers, had been ordered to move south to Tennessee, but the rumors spread fast. "Fort Sumter's fallen," someone shouted. "No, it's holding," another replied. Eli watched the sky. It glowed orange from the fires burning miles away. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just a rebellion. It was the unraveling of a nation. Letters and promises. 2 nights later, sitting by the campfire, Eli wrote to his mother. "Dearest Mother, the papers say the war will be over in 3 months. The officers seem sure of it. I pray they're right, but I've seen the look in men's eyes. It's not the look of a short fight. It's the look of something older, deeper, something we've been running from since this country began." He folded the letter carefully, sealing it with wax. He didn't know it then, but that letter would never reach home. Somewhere between Nashville and Shiloh, the mail cart carrying it would be ambushed by Confederate raiders, its contents scattered into the Tennessee mud, 1,000 unspoken words lost to history. The road to Shiloh. By the spring of 1862, Eli had seen enough to know the truth. War wasn't about glory. It was about hunger, mud, and the silence after a friend fell beside you. His unit marched through rain-soaked forests toward a place called Pittsburgh Landing. The locals called it Shiloh. Shiloh, place of peace. It would become one of the bloodiest battlefields in American history. Among the men in his company was Samuel Harper, a tall, broad-shouldered blacksmith from Ohio, who carried a small Bible tied with string around his neck. Samuel had once been a slave in Virginia. He had escaped through the Underground Railroad and vowed never to be owned again. On their 3rd night of marching, Samuel said quietly, "You ever think, Eli, maybe this ain't just a war for the Union? Maybe it's a war for the soul of every man born under it?" Eli nodded. He didn't yet understand how right Samuel was. Shiloh, April 6th, 1862. The dawn broke with fog thicker than breath. Birds fled the trees before the first gunshot. "Stay close," he shouted over the thunder of cannon fire. They moved between fallen trees and bodies, the world exploding around them. The ground shook as shells tore through the forest. At one point, Eli saw a boy no older than 15 clutching his stomach, calling for his mother. He tried to pull him back, but a bullet struck the boy's chest before Eli could reach him. By sunset, the forest of Shiloh was burning. The cost of Union. That night, Eli sat beside Samuel under a shattered oak. The rain came again, washing blood into the earth. "I killed a man today," Eli whispered.
Samuel looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "Then remember his face. Don't let it fade. That's how you stay human." Eli never forgot those words. When morning came, the Confederates had fallen back. The Union held the field, but the victory felt hollow. Nearly 24,000 men were dead or wounded. A chaplain passed among the tents, reading from Psalms. Eli closed his eyes and thought of his mother and of the letter she'd never read. The echoes of freedom. As the war dragged on, Eli's world shrank to the rhythm of marching boots and gunfire. He saw towns burn, families torn apart, and slaves freed from plantations only to wander the roads, unsure where to go. In 1863, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That night, Samuel stood by the campfire and said softly, "Maybe now this war means something after all." Eli smiled faintly. "It's always meant something, Sam. We just didn't know what yet." An ending that isn't the end. By the time the war ended in 1865, Eli was 27 and felt 100. He returned home to Kentucky on a train filled with limping men and empty stairs. The schoolhouse where he once taught was gone, burned in a raid 2 years before. But on his mother's porch, he found something unexpected. A letter. Weathered, mud-stained, but still sealed with wax. His own handwriting. The letter that never reached her had somehow been found and returned, carried by a stranger from Tennessee. He opened it, read his own words, and wept. "If this country ever tears itself apart, fight for the side that keeps it together." He looked out across the fields, silent now, but sown with ghosts, and whispered, "I did, Father. God help me, I did." And the wind carried the ashes of the Union into the dusk. The heat was unbearable. Flies swarmed over the trenches. Men baked under the southern sun, their uniforms stiff with sweat and mud. For 40 days, the Union Army surrounded the city like a tightening noose. Food ran out first, then hope. Eli Morgan had lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. His lips were cracked, his hands blistered from digging trenches in the clay soil. Beside him, Samuel Harper crouched low, eyes fixed on the smoke rising from the enemy lines. "You smell that?" Samuel muttered. "Gunpowder?" "No, bread. They're baking bread. Means they still got flour. We don't." Eli's stomach twisted. Their rations had been cut to a handful of cornmeal a day. Some men boiled leather belts for soup. Others ate rats. War had stripped them of everything but the will to live. The siege tightened. General Grant's orders were clear: starve the city until it surrendered. But the men in the trenches didn't feel like victors. They felt like ghosts waiting to be buried. At night, cannon fire lit the sky. The Mississippi shimmered red, reflecting each explosion like a heartbeat. Somewhere inside the city, civilians huddled in caves dug into the hillsides, women and children hiding from shells that fell like rain. Eli couldn't sleep. The sound of crying drifted across the river. Not soldiers, but families. He whispered, "We're killing them too, Sam." Samuel looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Maybe war don't care who it kills."
Captured. On June 22nd, the 12th Kentucky received orders to storm a Confederate battery. It was suicide, and they knew it. They charged at dawn through smoke and fire. Muskets flashed, men screamed. Eli fired twice before his gun jammed. He drew his bayonet, stumbled forward, then something struck him behind the head. When he woke, the world was upside down. He was lying in the dirt, wrists tied, surrounded by gray coats. Samuel was beside him, bleeding from the shoulder. "We're alive," Samuel whispered, smiling weakly. "For now," Eli muttered. They were prisoners. Camp Morton. The prisoners were marched for days, barefoot, starving, half delirious, until they reached Camp Morton, a Confederate prison outside Jackson. A broken wooden fence surrounded a field of dying men. The air stank of disease. Inside, Eli saw what starvation could do to the human body. Men were skeletons with sunken eyes, coughing blood, muttering prayers that never reached heaven. Samuel tore a strip from his shirt to bandage a stranger's wound. "Don't waste it," Eli said softly. "Ain't wastin'. This man's got a brother waiting somewhere. Maybe he'll make it home." That night, Eli wrote in the dirt with a stick, his new journal, since paper was forbidden. June 29th, 1863. We are forgotten. No one knows where we are. The war feels far away now, but death feels close. The Gospel and the Gallows. Every Sunday, the guards allowed a preacher to speak to the prisoners. He read from the book of Job, about suffering, endurance, and faith. Most men just stared blankly, but Samuel listened. "You believe all that?" Eli asked afterward. "About God testing us?" Samuel smiled faintly. "I don't think God's testing us. I think he's watching to see if we'll still help each other when the devil walks by." The devil walked by often, wearing a gray uniform and carrying a whip. One night, a prisoner tried to escape. They caught him near the fence and dragged him into the yard. The guards made everyone watch as they hanged him from the old oak. Eli turned away, but Samuel didn't. He looked straight at the body swinging in the moonlight. If freedom costs this much, then maybe it's worth even more.
Freedom by fire. Weeks passed. Disease spread like wildfire. Dysentery, fever, scurvy. Eli's vision blurred. He thought he might die there, nameless, buried in a trench beside strangers. Then one night, the sound of cannon fire shook the camp. Union forces were approaching. Grant's army was at the gates of Vicksburg. The guards panicked, some fleeing into the dark. Samuel grabbed Eli's arm. "Now or never!" They broke from the pen, running through the burning camp as chaos erupted around them. Bullets whined past their ears. Smoke filled their lungs. A Confederate officer shouted orders, then fell as a shell exploded nearby. Eli and Samuel stumbled into the woods, coughing, half blind. The river crossing. They reached the Mississippi by dawn. The river looked endless, silver in the early light. Samuel found a broken raft washed ashore, half burned but still floating. "Can you swim?" he asked. Eli shook his head. "Then pray." They pushed the raft into the current. The river carried them away, past the burning city, past the bodies of men who drowned trying to cross before them. For hours they drifted, silent except for the creak of wood and the sound of their own breathing. Finally, they saw bluecoats on the far shore. Union soldiers waved, shouting for them to come in. They had made it.